All right, welcome to BlockHeads in January of 2025. So, new year, new us. We'll be discussing the new 2025 CPT codes for fascial plane blocks that were recently released from CMS. Obviously, there's some dynamics in the government right now, but for now, we're going to assume things are going to stay stable for the sake of this discussion. There's a document that's associated with this discussion as well that will be shared when the recording comes out. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was setting up my share. Here we go. Okay, so basically what happened is that for a long time, fascial plane blocks were not included as separate procedures, and we had to kind of jury rig the documentation to trigger other blocks. Um, There's a generic block code that sometimes would be used, which reimburses very poorly. And so that was one of the reasons why this was thought to be necessary to get into the details of these blocks that are very common for us, but maybe not as common for anesthesia. So the main ones are the thoracic and lower extremity fascial plane blocks that you can see here. So all these codes are 644, and then they change after that, and they're not in any kind of order or anything that is helpful to us. So the thoracic plane blocks, so that's 64466, unilateral. And then if you would need to do a bilateral, a rector spinae for like pancreatitis or something, um, that's available now as well. Where previously the only like thoracic or abdominal fascial plane block that even existed was the TAP block. Now in the lower extremity fascial plane blocks, things like the PANG, I think the suprainguinal fascia iliaca, not the femoral nerve. Femoral nerve was, I think, its own CPT code. Those are now sectioned out. One of the big changes that needs to be recognized is that a lot of these codes include and bundle the ultrasound procedure. So you can't separately bill the ultrasound from the procedure. So that's one big thing. Another thing was, I had to add something, it's not included here. For bilateral other plane blocks, they usually have a additional code, like -52 or -53. So make sure that when you're documenting these, that if it is a bilateral procedure, that is very clear. So as we start diving into the question portion of this, I wanted to ask everybody a few things. So first question for everybody, once I activate my poll.
Hey, Dan, I have a couple thoughts on this stuff. So
Yeah,
we
go.
just updated our procedure note based on the fact that we have um, these new recommendations. And I think that the way to play this, and I know Kat has more experience with the billing component than I do, but when I set the billing component, I always, when I want to make changes, I bring documentation like this or the actual CPT code documentation and meet with our billers and coders. Um, they're the experts. I don't, anesthesia doesn't need to tell me how to intubate and what drugs to use. They can be like, hey, I've noticed that etomidate has poor success in patients that are septic. Have you guys ever thought about it? That's a good point. I'll look at that literature and maybe we'll switch to using ketamine. And I think that same analogy works very well for these guys. And my experience has been when we just did our new codes, our new block sheet, our new procedure note, that we had to jerry rig around these and it made it much nicer. So they were very helpful and useful. I think they're going to know this better than me. And that's again, I'd like to hear Kat's point of view. I think it's good to meet with them and not do this in a silo.
Yeah, I mean, I have not actually, I circled back to our coders and basically said, hey, here are the new codes. I know you guys are waiting for these with bated breath. And they were like, thank you very much. We're going to pay attention to this. But from the get-go, we actually built our entire procedure note based on guidance from the coders. So we took anesthesia's note, poached their little spreadsheet where They asked for all the requirements, and then we turned to our coders and said, hey, how does this look? And then they had a couple of things that nobody would have ever thought about, as in what direction the needle is going in from, or what nerves are actually anesthetized too. That's a very common one. So for example, we do a fascial plain block, but nobody actually puts down the 3 nerves that are injected. They actually ask to have specific nerves named in the procedure note, and then the whole left and right. So when we built the note to begin with, before we rolled it out, we ended up just building the procedure note that way. They have not come back to us and said, hey, you need to add this and that to the procedure note. So I would love to know if you guys have had any other experiences with that. So far, that has not been an ask, but
So
the
we
year
had we went back and forth with them, and they didn't ask for those nerves. They didn't
Okay.
care about in plane, out of plane. So I think you have to. I think it's almost you have to go to your hospital. They're the ones, unless you work at if you're working at a private clinic doing injections and receiving all your money from this, I think it's a reasonable game to play at a high level. But I think most of us work at hospital sites that Kat, probably you probably the most experience. My billers and coders want to do it their way. I give them information. Their job is to revenue collect. My job is not to revenue collect. I think it's important for me as an ultrasound person to know revenue and to understand it. But my billers and coders were like, this is what we need. I said, great, I'll build it for you. And then they look at it and they're like, this is great, move on. But I don't think anybody on this call, other than probably Kat, is receiving money from these blocks. We're looking at the numbers, and the hospital receives numbers, and then they help me allocate funds to buy systems, but not at the granular level where I'm making $100 on each block.
Yeah. And also just keep in mind the difference between naming the nerve and not naming the nerve. It's like 0.5 RVUs too, but it adds up, right? And you want to show the income potential, and, at the off chance that, we have patients with well-paying insurances. We don't. Perhaps you guys do.
Yeah, we don't.
There
So
is
our
a big
billers don't
difference.
care. Our billers don't care. So I'm gonna let them decide that pathway. But at least I give them the information and have the conversation, because I think my billers haven't even heard of this. They're like, oh, I didn't know idea this came out. So I think it's
Yeah, I have the same
depends on
experience.
so it depends on the level of their knowledge, and I think a lot of them are the tail and not the dog, if that makes any sense. So I think there's a utility in giving them information and saying we need to adjust our billing codes currently, because we never had a billing code for serratus anterior or retrospinal, which we do a ton of.
Correct. And just out of curiosity for this poll, we actually just have one blanket procedure note that has most of the annoying details in there. Do you guys do site specific procedure notes?
Site specific? No, we have a blank procedure note, and then they click on whichever block they're doing.
Okay.
So it's like
That's for an
consent,
Epic, right?
time. Yeah, we're consent. Yeah, right. Epic, time, laterality. We don't do bilateral for the block, because if we push bilateral, then it would just make our sheet complicated. So we'd rather have a resident do 2, just because of the one bilateral CPT code throws off all of our workflow. So we chose not to do it. So it's unilaterally what needle size, and the needle size is just because we want to be able to know how many needles we're using. Volume of anesthetic, because we want to transfer that information to our anesthesiologists upstairs, who are deciding how much more volume they can give. So a lot of it's built around both the user and the CPT code people, or the billing people. It's not purely billing.
Yeah. No, that's
So when you structure your generic one template to rule them all, like does it, like, you check like, okay, I'm doing a serratus, therefore when I pick that, it triggers all the language of like I'm anesthetizing, thoracic nerves, T whatever to T whatever. Like, is that triggered, Cat, in your generic one template? No,
no, we have to put it in.
by free text.
We dictate.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't do that, Dan.
It's clunky, but that's the best that Cerner could do.
We just click a button, and for them, they're fine with that.
Yeah, we'll be moving to Epic.
Talk to your
in a
coders
year.
and see what they think. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. What other questions do people have about this, or coding and documentation in general?
I have a question for Kat. How much do you know your revenue? Do you have your numbers at all? It'd be interesting to know. I mean, we do anywhere from about 700 I think we're now at about 800 blocks a year, probably a little higher. So we're doing a large number of blocks every single, I mean, it's probably 2 or 3 a day, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
And so I think it's a huge monetary catch. The problem with my hospital is the transparency or the of data is very minimal. One, from even getting the number of blocks we do is I have to fight to get that, and we're actually building a kind of a something I can see constantly in Epic, but also the capture, like how much I can, from that I can get billing numbers. I just don't know capture, how much we're collecting. Do you have any data on that? Because for us, it's so hard because of all the DRGs and also because of the payer mix, because of just our hospital is not, if I was at Kaiser, I would know that number.
Yeah, no, we actually just changed our coding company about a year and a half ago. So the last time I ran this, and again, we have a large percentage of, it's a safety net hospital, right? So a lot of our visits in itself, the payment for the block ends up getting bundled into the payment for the ER visit. So they say, hey, your CPT code is really cute. We're just going to pay for the visit. We're not going to pay for anything extra. So the last time I ran this, that was in a previous coding company, the capture was between 17 to 20%. So it was not great. I need to actually come back at it at the end of the year and give it back to my coders and see, hey, what are we actually getting out of these?
In those patients that they're putting it into the ER visit, are they upcoding? Are they adding an RVU? Because generally
They were
should be adding it.
significantly.
See, our group, when we're doing that, they're up generating RVU. So they're bumping the RVU up, which is very useful for us. So when I drop a note that has ultrasound, our billers tell me, billers and coders, excuse me, they're up charging the RVU. So if you're at a whatever, they bump you up to a 4.
Correct.
Because you're doing a block. And so that is a huge, so again, that is a huge monetary generation, which I can't quantify in a very specific number. It's hard to.
So I know that they're upcoding. So you're submitting the bill for the procedure, but are you actually getting payout on it?
So that's the hard part. That's the problem with Highland, right? We have it is a hospital that kind of worked without billers and coders for years. And I could tell you stories. Orthopedics hadn't billed for like 10 years. It's just because it was all money coming from the government. And then when Obamacare happened, then we were, doing the 100-meter dash, probably on the, 0 while everybody's at 70-yard line. And so we were very far behind. So now we're kind of catching up slowly, but there's a lot, like getting orthopedics to bill is more important than getting Arun to get block billing. So it's happening. It just, the clarity of data is very difficult.
Will upbill upcoming? Sorry, I'm trying to read your comment.
Upcoding, it autocorrected.
Okay.
So,
got it.
When Joshua Gutman runs his billing and coding ultrasound things, he usually says, as much as we think upcoding by using it as it's an increased complexity component and it upcodes from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5. If you do that versus just CPT billing, your CPT billing will win out. I don't know if that's actually true because I know most of the diagnostic procedures that I do are pretty minimal on the RVU scale.
I 100% agree with you. But when you look at our CPT codes like echo, the problem is if they get an inpatient echo, we don't get billed for that. And also if they get admitted to the hospital, the DRG, right, of congestive heart failure admission lumps all that together. So you don't get the individual CPT code for the bedside echo. So I agree with you that I think monetarily, it's a better ask for us to get specific bills, but in our patient population, that's why it's so murky. That's why I can get that the estimate of 12 cents in the dollar or 22 cents in the dollar, whatever numbers people are throwing out, because it's a real guesstimate. I think when we get, something that's a little more intelligent than our billers and coders looking at this data, and I mean that by technology, I think we'll get a much more less opaque data set, if that makes any sense.
Correct.
Does that make sense to everybody? I think this is
yeah.
confusing to me. It took me forever to figure this out, and nobody explained that all this that I do a bedside echo, and then it can be all over the place. It can be I can get billed for that bedside echo. The patient gets a comprehensive bedside echo. The patient gets a kind of whatever company they're at, whatever insurance company bundles it, and so they are unable to tell me any of this information.
Yeah.
It may not matter as much for this particular conversation because we have to document the procedure anyway. And if we do, you might as well do it the right way, and you might as well create your templates such that they do it the right way. One thing we haven't talked about yet, real quick, is just indications. Please don't make the indication like the reduction of a shoulder. Make the indication pain control. And a cat, I'm sure I see you smiling, so like you've had this conversation so many times. But if you want to just, do your one-liner on that, I'll leave it to you.
Oh yeah. So if your indication is a shoulder reduction, so that's your indication for the block, you're only going to get paid for the reduction. You're not going to get paid for the block. Just an FYI, that payment is just going to be one procedure. So your indication is
Can you put
uncontrolled pain.
Can you put pain control? Because what we've done is put pain control for, there's a procedural and a non-procedural. So there's pain control, and the other button is pain control for a procedure. And then pain control for procedure clicks down and you can put shoulder reduction, or you can put reduction. So that's how our CPT, well, we want it because we want the granular data on when we're bypassing procedural sedation, because when we bypass procedural sedation with ultrasound, I think that's a huge, so I think anesthesiologists look at blocks as a tool for bypassing general. I think for us, at least for me, one of the big asks for ultrasound or for ultrasound guided nerve blocks is that it bypasses procedural sedation. And so I want to know that granular number, because then I can publish that, if that makes any sense. So how I built it is pain control and then pain control 4, and they click that button, and then laceration repair, joint reduction, whatever.
Yeah, you might not get payout on that, actually.
Is
Okay,
the
I'll check
procedure
with them. That's
part
a good point.
being included in the code submission? Because if it's just granular data for research purposes, they may just say like it's for pain control, period, and that's what the insurance company sees.
That's why I put pain control 4. There's pain control, just pain control, and pain control 4 procedure. That's why because of cats, that's why I put in there. They're okay with that. I'll see what happens. I just finished these, so they'll get back to me.
Correct. Because they might bill it, but they're that the insurance company is going to say basically, well, you just did a procedure. So that's a part of your procedure. So it would be actually interesting to look at what your payout is on that, because you might not capture it. And then even if they don't pay you for it, what happens in the back end is that the coding company goes and scrubs your chart, meaning is that they try to resubmit the payment for that, they basically see what you were not paid for, and then they try to still capture it on the back end, but then the coding company gets a piece of whatever you may or may not get paid out on. So even if you do get paid, your revenue on it is going to decrease. But again, we're talking like 0.1, 0.2 RVUs, and I'm not sure if really significant. So I'd rather have your data than the RVU maybe.
So it sounds like build yourself, get it through your builder coders, and then look at the data and then see what you're not getting billed for, and then go back and adjust your chart.
Correct.
Adjust your template.
Yeah, you're not gonna hit this, get 100% capture with your first procedural now. I've made plenty of changes over the years.
Yeah, it's frustrating because somebody else should be doing that, right? They're the ones that are making the money. I'm not making one penny. They should be smart enough to figure that out.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to get these things done through IT and everything.
Has anybody else had any issues? I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
I apologize. As someone who is about to go to Epic in like a year or so, what advice do you have for people who are in that pot of muck?
Steal somebody else's templates and then speak to your coders with the templates and then build your templates. You have to get billing and coding involved, and I actually have an IT person who's terrible, who I work with, but it's that's part of the deal, that I have to like meet with him and walk through each line, and then he'll be like, okay, let's move this to live, and before it goes live, I make sure I play with it for a day or two because I know he messes it up, and then once that's done, then it goes live, and then you have to do education for your staff because they're going to be like, what does this mean? Anybody else have issues? Anybody else use Epic and have the same issues? Nobody uses Epic. Okay, that's how I've done it. I've had to do it very systematically, and the more I expect somebody else to know what they're doing, the more errors I found with my templates. So and I can send you all my templates, Dan. They're all up to date, and we're actually updating all the ones because I did it 10 years ago now. My ultrasound division wants to update it. So yeah, maybe when we meet in Miami, I'll give you all of them, and then you can just post them on the website.
I think that'd be very valuable.
Yeah,
All
they're
right, we got a
not
lot of other
perfect.
people.
They're not
Sure.
perfect, and everybody, like, it's funny because I'll have like a second year resident be like, "Why don't you have this?" And everybody wants perfection, and what they don't realize is simplicity and perfection kind of go hand in hand. If I make the template 6 pages long of perfect, nobody fills it out. We make the template 3 clicks, no, we don't get all the information. So it has to me, it has to be a conveyor of information to the next doctor, but also click off all the buttons that allow billing to occur. So there's this fine dance that you have to play with, not too much, not too little.
Great point. For the other people who are on the call, was this news to you guys, or did you guys already know about this?
I missed the first couple minutes, but are you referring to like the fact that you have to choose between the two pathways, or?
No, mostly just that the 2025 codes changed, that we now have access to fascial plane blocks that will specifically code a lot of the things that we actually do, rather than trying to code for something that doesn't quite fit, like, square peg, round hole sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, serratus and rector pang were not CPT codes, if I remember correctly, Dan.
Yeah.
I joined late, so it's Matt Mokum at Medical News, South Carolina. It was not news to me. I actually just recreated we just were in the process of a butterfly system rollout, so I just had to recreate several of our templates to sort of branch those out into their own individual standalones. I did have one question related to that. Have you guys seen clearly where QL blocks are supposed to fall? Because like everything I could find, it specifically address a lot of things, but doesn't specifically address all of them. And are they still supposed to fall into that catch-all, or do they actually fall? I mean, to me, they would make sense to fall into like the TAP catchment, since it's more of like an abdominal field block. That's where I've been thinking of putting them, like that and rectus sheath. But that's not one I've specifically seen noted.
I have not seen it noted either, and that's what that's an other for us, and that is in that catch-all. That is correct. That is what our billers say. But again, we're going back and forth with them right now.
Yeah, nobody in our ED is actually doing it, so it's more I'm involved in like our system-wide side, so it's more like future thinking of if and when like anesthesia gets on board with our system-wide stuff, and making sure they're not having to redo work later on.
Yeah, our procedure bills are very different than our anesthesiology procedure bills. I made an effort because I don't want to use anesthesia procedure bills on Epic, simply because I think that what they're doing is very different than what we're doing. So I've kept our procedure codes. It's all under POCUS. So I mean, on our people use Epic, we go into procedure and then POCUS, and then all my POCUS builds come in, and one of the POCUS builds is nerve blocks, arthrocentesis, the whole bit, and it's specifically away from anesthesia because I don't want to be connected to them. But that's how I played the game.
Yeah, it sounds like tap block
And
was where you were landing on that one. So that seems to be what everyone else recommends.
And to the question about like billing, like in the system myself, so like our ED has coders, but I just actually got off a call with one of my revenue integrity folks, I've gotten like system-wide access to something called Cubes, if that makes sense to anybody, which is like our system's way to like effectively through an Excel doc link into the master like billing side. Our coders have been giving me for years now like a quarterly report of like CPT and even like MRN charge by charge, which gives me the professional fee for the list of studies that I give them, what the charge was, what the reimbursement was, based on that sort of thing. So I now have access to that to like play with it. I will say the interesting thing based on the coding side that we just discovered is that our coders weren't adding the technical fees until we just rolled out this new system, that now they're hard tied to our worksheets. So we just had, I don't know, whatever it is, 14 years of professional only fees happening out of the EVs for ultrasound studies, which was super fun to discover.
You're probably 14 years ahead of me. So I'm envious that you have that conversation at that high level. I'm still, yeah, I'm sure that is flagrantly happening at my hospital, and that I'll never know until somebody figures it out who is getting paid a salary. Yeah.
That's bananas. Like we only started billing the facility fee, I think like a year or two ago, and our revenue like tripled from ultrasound. And so we took that to hospital leadership, and now we're all in the system-wide committee. And now that with the rollout of Epic in the next few years, they're asking us, like, do you guys prefer Synchronicity, QPath, or Butterfly Enterprise, or any of those systems to try and couple with it? And they're saying, well, we want to go with Synchronicity because PAX is already Sonosite. And so, well, but they're saying they're going to get a big discount if they go with Synchronicity. And so they're going to save a bunch of money. I didn't look at Synchronicity since 2017. That was my last interaction with that software.
Dan,
So
before you do that, talk to someone at UMass because they went Synchronicity. They're disappointed and likely within 5 years transitioning off Synchronicity. So
Talk to Irvine, same thing. They're like the number of, as the person who runs
tons of
that,
problems.
just constant 24/7. It's like I have a full-time job now to get Synchronicity up and running, and we're moving to Synchronicity. And I told them that, I said, I'm not going to do any work for you. I'm just going to send you tickets, and you're going to have 500 tickets a day for me, and you guys have to figure it out. And when it crashes, the billing goes down. I'll look at the billing numbers and blame you. And now they're freaking out. But this is a common problem with Synchronicity. I don't know if anyone else is using it. Maybe we should have another one of these on middleware, but it is not the ideal middeware.
Arun, there's no way
Yeah.
to get off that. That's gonna. I know what you're saying, but like it is gonna be a. You're gonna hate the fact that this is happening.
But I've sent an email in capital letters. I do not want to use Synchronicity. My name is Arun Nagdev. When the data crashes and you lose money, this email will sit openly and
in
you guys can figure it out.
perpetuity.
I literally said that in capital letters. I said, I'm telling you, do not get Synchronicity. And they're like, the IT person that's, that works there 26 hours a week comes over, is like, I want Synchronicity. I'm like, why? They're like, the same argument. We have PAX through Fujifilm, so we want to go through and just have the same Fujifilm pathway.
So what middleware in a perfect world would you guys go with? Can't have that conversation online.
Oh, I don't know if
That's
there's a perfect one, but